Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. A hike in property taxes, the largest in years, is giving property owners pause in Wisconsin. This week, the governor proposed $1.3 billion in tax relief to prevent future increases, a plan that Republicans say doesn't solve the root of the issue. We are digging into what's behind the increase and where your money is going. New at 4, Taylor Zebel spoke with an expert to find the answers. Taylor.
Cami, property taxes in Wisconsin are the primary revenue source for technical colleges, municipalities, and local school districts. Back in 2023, Governor Tony Evers used a partial veto to increase K-12 funding limits for each student for hundreds of years. And in last year's budget, there was no increased state funding for schools, which was approved by both the governor and the Republican-controlled legislature. It shifts a lot of those increased funding limits onto property taxpayers. And St. Norbert economics professor Kevin Quinn says that's been reflected on tax bills for this year.
People are looking at about an 8% increase in the school funding. And if that's half, that's a substantial amount of money that property taxes have gone up.
If this proposal gets approved, we would not see the effects of it until next year. Republican lawmakers have spoken out against the governor's tax relief plan, agreeing something has to be done, but saying this isn't the way to go about it. Coming up at 6, we'll hear about the potential impact property tax relief could have. Cami?